Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township, May 15th, 2018. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think that's him.
Are you Pastor Robbins? Okay, come on up and open us up in prayer, please.
Sorry, Logan.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to meet and discuss and cover some things. We ask for your wisdom. We ask that you would guide our thinking. And our prayer is a reminder to us, Lord, that we need you and that we're dependent on you. We ask that you'd bless these proceedings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have public hearing. A, request for approval of a resolution to establish the Springbrook Subdivision Road Special Assessment District role. I look for a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion and supported to open the public hearing. At this time, if you would like to come forward and speak on,
Got a vote.
I got to call the roll. Sorry about that. Call the roll,
Mr.
please.
Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye. And the motion passed 7-0. Okay, at this time, if you'd like to speak on the resolution to establish the Springbrook subdivision, you could come on up at this time. Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion. Second.
Motion and supported by Mr. Steiner. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, discussion with board members?
This is the public hearing to set the role for Springbrook subdivision. This is a little bit different. This resolution, you'll notice, has 3 different amounts, and that is set for the new portion, the old portion, and then the entrance. And then I have Barry here, if anyone has questions about that and why we divided it like that. But the newer portion had already been done a few years back, so it didn't need as much work as the older portion. And then the approach off of Secor, they didn't think it was fair for those people to pay as much, so they broke that down a little lower. So if there's no questions, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution to establish the Springbrook Subdivision Road Special Assessment District role as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion supported.
But I do have a question.
Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
Okay. I mean, I'm sure it is. I'm sure you checked with Phil, but this is, I mean, one assessment for different charges on different lots, that's legal? I mean, that's, I've never seen it before. Not that that doesn't mean anything, but,
Never seen it before, and you may never see it again.
oh, one of your little concoctions, huh?
Well, no, not mine, but Barry's. But I think it's a good concoction for this particular application due to the different sections or plats within this particular subdivision. What was done in this instance was to match the benefit to the expenditure for the particular lot owners, depending on where they're situated within the subdivision. And Barry put a lot of effort and work into making sure that the benefit derived was equal to the expenditure made by each. And you're right, it's unusual. But I think it works in this application. You may never see it again, because normally in every subdivision or in every special assessment district, the assessment is equal throughout the entire district, because in most cases the benefit is equal. But in this case, it seemed to make sense, and so my opinion and the opinion of my partner Tom Graham was to let it go forward on that basis.
All 3 different, in one, not 3 different special assessments, but, okay.
Yes.
And they're all for 10 years?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and if anyone has a problem, they see Barry.
Well, I mean, he can explain to them, and I think he's done a lot of explaining.
Yeah.
And received what probably is a consensus, but, you know, the remedy is to go to the tax tribunal for any individual taxpayer. But sometimes you think out of the box. This is one of those times I think it works.
Thanks for the education, I appreciate
We did explain this at all the hearings that we had with the people, so they knew going in that it was going to be done like this, and they were okay with that.
it. Okay, good.
Okay, would you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye. And the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item B, request for approval of a resolution to approve application for industrial facilities exemption certificate for Sunrise Windows LLC. For a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion. Open the public hearing.
I'll support.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, at this time, if you'd like to come up and speak on this item, now would be the time to do so.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name is Rob Zataki. I'm Vice President of Operations for Sunrise Windows. Joining me is Brian Whitaker, our CFO. Brian's been there a little bit under a year. I've been here about a year and a half at Sunrise, and truly enjoyed it so far. So what we are working on right now is a little bit of background I'll give you is we're a company that's been located at our current facility since approximately 1995. We've grown over the years, and right now we are in expansion mode. We currently have 360 employees working for Sunrise Windows, and that split is about 260 at our Temperance Road facility currently. We also operate another facility in Toledo on Matzinger Road, which is about 60 employees. And we have also just done a recent acquisition of another window and door business down in Louisville, Kentucky, which represents about 60 employees. So we've made the decision that we'd love to stay here at the site in Temperance and expand our facility so we can co-locate. It's our business. We call it One Sunrise. That's our slogan for our project. And really what it's about for us is operationally, we love to see our people. When we're spread across two facilities, across state lines, it's only a 15-minute drive, but on beautiful days like today when you should be wearing galoshes, it's not quite as easy as it sounds. So we really miss an opportunity to spend time with our people, communicate effectively across the board, and also enjoy some operational efficiency. So it's really our mission to grow here in this township and in Temperance. So that's what we're working on right now. We're working on an approximately 70,000 square foot building addition, which will allow everyone from the Toledo facility to be here in Temperance. Hopefully by the end of the year, if the project goes according to plan. And that's a little bit about what we're trying to do and the motive behind it and our decision that we'd just love to stay here and grow, down the path. The last thing I'll mention is right now we're pretty much busting at the seams with our current facility. So our ability to introduce new products, to bring to our customers, or to talk about increased capacity is relatively limited. So I give you a pretty short-term view of what's in for the job creation here in this county. Roughly 60 right off the bat with potential for another 30. That, in my opinion, is really the tip of the iceberg. What we like to do here is continue to grow. We have 3 new products that this will allow us the room to do. We'd like to launch those at the end of this year. We expect that could be a significant volume increase with additional job growth over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a very exciting time for us. We're super excited about. Paul, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you last year, and to Tim for helping us put this together. And we're just really excited about this opportunity. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Fredericks?
Where's Gary?
Yeah, good question. I had Gary's name in here to mention. I didn't know if that'd be good or bad, so I left it out. So yeah, Gary founded our business, as you obviously know. He still consults with us and has been pretty close to us on this journey of our decision. I think it was really pretty easy for him to help us make this final decision, so. I'm not quite sure where he is tonight.
The only reason I
however.
ask is I worked with him when he was developing the business.
Okay.
And,
He's done an excellent job.
Yeah. The other thing is, you haven't put any construction in place yet.
We have not. We've started, we have some plans laid out and our desire is to
Okay,
work
I mean,
with
that's
Step
important.
Mako.
That's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And hopefully, housing starts and remodeling will be about 1.2 million houses a year, and remodeling works real well.
We hope so, yeah, as you already know, we're a pretty much replacement-oriented business.
Yeah.
So we certainly love the economic state right now of people investing in their homes.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you guys expanding here and staying here and choosing Bedford over Toledo.
Yeah,
So we're excited for that. and
we are as well.
We
very much so.
appreciate it.
Yeah. You're welcome, thank you.
Any more?
Just one other comment. So once this becomes your successful move, you got a partner down the street that has a similar scenario, Temperance and Matzinger Road, called Syncreon. You can just tell them how great it was to move
I'd love to.
everything to Bedford.
Love to.
But good to see that a company's been around as long as you have and continue to stick with Bedford. It just goes to show that this is a good community to work with
Yeah.
and be able to support your business, and we appreciate you
Yeah,
being here
we
as well.
appreciate the support as well, yeah. The Crab Road redo is very welcome from last year, so we're no longer dodging potholes, which wasn't great for shipping windows over, but so, we love the support.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Any more comments?
Mr. Supervisor, if I
Oh,
may, I just wanted to add, this is Tim Lake with Monroe County Business Development Corporation, just wanted to add the fact that we've also introduced them to Michigan Works, our employment folks, and they'll be working with them closely to look to hire the workforce that they need out of our area, so,
Very cool.
okay.
Very exciting. Okay. I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion.
Second?
Motion supported by Mr. Steiner. Discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, Ms. Hirschberger?
Well, they said almost everything I was going to say, but. So Sunrise Windows is a long-established company in the township. They are applying for a 12-year tax abatement on real property totaling $3,400,000 at their location at 200 Enterprise Drive in Temperance. This project would result in a retention of 260 jobs and the creation of 90 jobs within 2 years of the completion of the project. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the IFEC for Sunrise Windows located at 200 Enterprise Drive, Temperance, Michigan, for a 12-year tax abatement on real property totaling $3,400,000, resulting in 260 retained jobs and the creation of 90 jobs within the 2 years of the completion of the project, as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
Just wondering, do we need to say the 50% at 12 years? I mean, isn't there a, do we?
Friendly amendment, Paul?
Well, we can make that part of the motion because that's what the intent is.
Well, it-
12 years, maximum.
12 years at 50%.
12 years,
Right.
yes.
Okay, I have a friendly amendment then.
Paul, do you accept the friendly amendment?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you guys again. Okay, item 2, approval of the agenda. Before Mr. Lake leaves, I'd like to add him to the number 4 under presentations, along with Mr. Pryor, to give us a quick update on the Lewis Avenue Redevelopment Committee. He's coming back. And then I would like to remove 3D. And I'd like to Mr. Goldsmith just to give us a quick explanation as to why we're removing 3D, just so everybody knows.
Sure, we're going to look at our relationship with our CDBG loans and to make sure that by offering the appointment of Stephanie as a member to that board, that we're not going to be violating any of the covenants or conditions imposed either by the federal government or the state of Michigan, because she's with Monroe County Opportunity Program, so we don't want to run afoul of any regulations, restrictions, or requirements. Something else that the board should be thinking about, or I would ask you to think about, is that I've made a recommendation, and I think we're going to move forward with this, is to create bylaws for our board to follow, because this particular board, although you make the appointments, that board acts independent of you to interview applicants for CDBG loans and ultimately to approve applications for CDBG loans. And quite frankly, your board has done a remarkable job over the past several years in monitoring those loans, collecting those loans, and then using the money that's collected to reinvest in individuals in our community for improvements that they need, lower income folks that need improvements to their homes. So the board is operating very well. However, we just need to, I think, need to have bylaws for that. Now, give some thought to the fact that Stephanie is not a Bedford Township resident. We don't have a policy. We don't have bylaws that would prevent that. And so the board needs to, I think, give consideration whether or not you want someone who is not a resident of this township acting in that capacity. I think she brings a skill set that would serve the board well with her experience with MCOP, but the board needs to think about that and maybe think about at the same time whether there are other qualified applicants who are residents. Now, no one has come forward to express, to my knowledge, to express a desire to become involved in the board who is a resident. That doesn't mean there's not somebody out there. So those are some things that the board needs to be thinking about in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be brought back.
Okay. And then I'd like to add, under the consent agenda, everybody has the resolution in front of them for Fred Crum's 100th birthday. Under 3D. And that's it. I look for a motion or any changes or any additions.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Support.
Okay, motion supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 3, consent agenda. The agenda committee reports. A, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the minutes of the May 1st, 2018 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. B, the committee recommends to the full board to accept and place on file the general savings, pooled funds, and CD reports from the treasurer. C, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the revenue, expense report, and balance sheet for the period ending April 30th, 2018. D, the resolution for Fred Crum for his 100th birthday celebration.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Okay, we have a motion.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Clemens. Discussion? Okay, seeing none. Could you, we have some discussion.
My recollection with respect to the Grant and Loan Committee was that there were bylaws sometime way back when. It may be just lost.
I think you might be right. I think you might be right. The bylaws were searched for and weren't found. And, but they haven't been found, and so I think you're probably right that they may have been lost, but if we can't find them, we should create a new set.
I just recall that there were bylaws only because at that time we were being audited by the auditors with respect to the grant and loan, and also who was paying, who wasn't paying, what all the documents were. So I would, if we can find it, we need to, I agree with you, we need to move forward, get some.
And the thought just occurred to me, we'll check our files at our law firm. We may have a copy there because we retain everything that pertains to the township.
Yeah, I've
It
seen
might-
that.
It might be on, yes, it might be on, it might have been scanned and retained, but I'll
Okay,
check that.
whatever.
Don't look in Tom's
Yeah,
office.
go.
I can't imagine you find him in
He
there.
knows where everything's at.
It's on microfiche.
Could be fishing.
Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens? Or was it Frederick?
Who cares?
Sorry.
Who cares?
I will change that. No, I want to change it. Mr. Frederick?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 4, presentations. Mr. Tim Lake and Al Pryor, could you come on up, please? I just wanted you guys to give a quick little update on kind of where we're at and when the board can expect you guys to come forward with kind of the direction we would like to move with the board. It's been,
Absolutely.
you know,
So we're referring to the Lewis Avenue Corridor Committee that's met 5 or 6 times so far with the general idea that we would come forward with a plan for the corridor itself, if you will, a business plan, as part of a strategy that we would look at a corridor improvement authority, if not for the whole section, certainly for that's allowable by law. There's some prescribed, with that legislation, some prescribed things that have to happen, so I'm not sure all of the corridor qualifies, but for that section that does, and certainly the temperance area does that already. But we bring that plan forward hopefully in the next, what do you think, 30 to 60 days, most likely to the Township Board for your review and approval. There's a lot of great activity going on. We're already seeing some activity along that corridor in that temperance area anyway, and a lot of interest with folks wanting to redevelop the area. So we're kind of positive about what's happening right now, so, in this economy.
Tim, can you touch a little bit on the options of tax capture?
Yeah, the primary one that we're considering is, again, as I mentioned, is the Corridor Improvement Authority, and it really acts like a DDA, okay? And the fact that inside the boundaries, an authority is established, that authority then makes the regulations or handles what happens, improvements that happens inside of that boundary. The tax that is being collected today would be capped, and any improvement in tax revenue that comes in would go into that authority then for use in, again, directly in there to improve, whether it be sidewalks or facade program is one of the most popular ones that folks use, so those type of things. It can be used to, again, attract more businesses to the area primarily, certainly enhance the area for the residents that are there.
Okay.
We've looked at there's other tools around, but that tool seems to be the best one available. And we've consulted with MEDC on this. We've had Paula Holtz, who in her previous life is actually, was Tecumseh's kind of Main Street program and economic development. She's been down, looked at at Temperance and recommended that that's probably the best tool we might use, so. I don't know, have you got thoughts?
As Tim said, we've met with MEDC twice. Some other things that are going on down there as well is that we'll be having a meeting with Michigan Housing Development Authority. I had a call from a builder that is possibly looking at a couple sites on Lewis Avenue, maybe to build affordable housing. So they're taking a look at that. The Powsland Market, only Paul will probably know what the Powsland Market is, because that was the building next to Sunoco, the white one.
Poseland.
Is that what it is, Poseland? Okay. That is under contract, and they should be closing on that one fairly soon on both those buildings, so those will be occupied, which will be nice. The laundromat has been purchased. It was very toxic. Nobody wanted to touch that building. It is now being cleaned up, and that is going to be used for a showroom. Otherwise, it would have been sitting there probably for about the next 30 years. We're also taking a look at bike routes. There's some money out there which we're going to apply for, either for a study or for signage, because we can do an urban bike route. We don't have to expand roads and all that other good stuff. We can do it through signage. If you go through Detroit, they've done it that way, and you can have bike routes take people through Temperance, through Lambertville, through Samaria, and so on. And it's mapped out to where it's like your safest roads that you can go through. So we'll keep you informed on how that's going, but Michigan does have money for that. So we're looking at that as well. Abe, who owns the Sunoco station, he's going to be putting up a repair center for bicycles, when they're coming through, if they get flat tires and so on. He's going to have a rack at his station for everybody to use, no charge. So he's putting that up. It's going to be an investment, probably about $2,300 he's going to put into that. So he's a big believer in Lewis Avenue. So those are just some of the things that we're taking a look at. We'll keep you informed as we move forward to the different funding opportunities and so on.
Al, when can we expect something about back on the grant?
Oh, the TAP grant, I was told probably the second week of June.
Second week of June. Don't forget about the Lions Den. They're a
Right.
big move. They're
And Lions
moving
Den,
very rough.
they've moved, which is really good. So that building's going to be improved. And what was kind of nice with Paula at the MEDC, we also did talk about maybe redoing some of the fronts on those buildings, because there's actually some fake fronts on some buildings there that if you tear those off could actually be restored.
Mr. Fredericks?
You said you just talked to Mishta about affordable housing. Is that Section 8 housing?
No, I just talked to Van. In terms of affordable housing, Section 8 is kind of a misnomer, and even if you did
Oh, no,
Section 8.
no. Section 8 housing is an actual division.
Yes, it is. We did not talk about
it's not a
Section 8,
misnomer.
and that is, no, I didn't mean it that way, but a lot of people have a negative connotation of Section 8 housing, and there shouldn't be, because in terms of what Section 8 is and so on, it is not bad for your community. Matter of fact, if you look at Toledo, they've done a fantastic project downtown. And it's, so we're just, Mr. Fredericks, we're just in the beginning stages of talking to them. So affordable housing
Well,
can mean
with all
getting
due
tax
with all
incentives.
due
and-
respect, you be very, very up forward with what you're doing in that area. Don't come in here all of a sudden and say, well, here's what we've agreed to do.
Well, we haven't agreed to anything, and we wouldn't do that. We would present
Well, I'm just-
to the board to decide to do that if we were to move forward. So, and also too, in talking to developers, a lot of it's in their hands as well too. But affordable housing can mean where somebody is actually building houses that could only be 1,000 square feet, and they may be expandable and have nothing to do with Section 8 housing. So,
Section 8 housing is a specific designation. for
yes, I'm
housing.
familiar with that.
So, okay. I just
But
want-
affordable housing to a builder,
I don't want to hear any more about, well, it
Well,
doesn't mean anything. It does mean
I didn't say it didn't mean anything, but affordable housing to a builder isn't always Section 8. Affordable
I
housing can
accept
mean
that.
different
I
price
accept that.
ranges.
That's why I asked you, is
Right.
it Section 8? And you say no.
Any
At
more
this
questions
point,
from board members?
we're not in that discussion.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Yes.
Could you remind me what the parameters of the corridor improvement is? Extends from, basically it's north and south.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you mean from the state line to past Erie Road?
Oh, that's what it
The
is?
study area is what we're looking at, yeah. So the Corridor Improvement Authority is, typically looks at zero lot lines, buildings up on sidewalk, that type of thing. So it's looking for that, and then residential behind it, or even up on top, more like a traditional downtown would look like. So, and that area qualifies for that. So I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to do some more study work to figure out how far south that may go, that characteristic, so on Lewis Avenue per se. If
Oh,
we-
so it's not totally
It
defined?
may not
It's
totally, it may
Oh,
not.
okay.
I'm not 100% sure. We got further studies going to be required, and we're in the
Okay.
process of doing that right now.
And is the capture the same as the DDA, or is it,
It could be structured really any way you want it to be. If you wanted to split that capture, you could split it. It could be 80-20, however the agreement is ultimately written up.
but I mean, the taxing units have a right to be included or to
Yes, they can opt out.
opt out?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. And then, what did you mean toxic?
What?
Yeah. The laundromat.
It was polluted in terms, it was a dry
Air,
cleaner.
I mean, is it?
No, the inside of the building through chemicals,
They use,
right, that they use. So he's got to clean all that up, which he's
ground,
agreed to
mainly.
do that, ground and inside, so.
Okay. And then I wasn't prepared for this because I was on the agenda, but this is fine. I have a question, don't take it as a insult, but I've heard concerns about the makeup of the committee. Is the committee the same as was appointed by this board?
So far it has been, we haven't,
There's no members on the board that weren't appointed by this board.
right,
Okay, you haven't added any?
No.
no, not at
And-
this time.
And
No,
the
there won't be
concern-
any time that we would add any board members.
Okay. The
I don't know
concern
where you're
is
hearing
that
that.
there's quite a few real estate people on the committee. Are they in any way profiting off of their,
No, they haven't purchased any buildings or have done anything of that nature. And with real estate people that are on there, those are the ones that are usually in tune to, that if there's buyers out there or who's doing what. So that's why they're on there in terms of that.
okay,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I
that-
understand their
right.
expertise, I just,
Right.
you know, you're too young to know this, but many, many, many years ago, when the zoning was brought forth in Bedford, there were quite a few political people who zapped up all the land to be able to profit off of the new zoning, and I'm sure Phil knows the story, he wasn't alive then either, but. So, I mean, my concern
That's a long
is,
time.
my concern as a representative of the people
Right.
is that we're making sure that we don't bring people together that have an opportunity to
Right.
profit more so than other people.
And,
Well, keep
and
in
one of
mind,
the.
this board
right.
appoints everybody on that board.
No, that's why I ask if other
And,
people.
and the one real estate person on there, he does own a building downtown. So he
Well,
does
no.
have an interest and he, yeah,
The
so.
DDA is all about people
Exactly.
owning property.
So,
Okay,
yep.
okay.
Mr. Francis?
Tim, you had mentioned the corridor improvement similar to the DDA where the, the tax incentive or the incremental tax would be captured. I don't think we've ever had one of those in Bedford. Is that entity a separate entity as DDA is and is totally independent from the township?
Yeah, except for, you know, zoning and normal regulations, building permits, that same thing. You still have to go through the township, but it is an authority like your DDA is, yes.
But they have final say in whatever they do down there without the vote of any elected person. DDA,
As
that's
far
the
as where,
part
where
that
money's
bothers me about
spent, where
DDA.
money's spent in those type of things, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the money they capture. But again, the tools, there is some, I believe there's some things in the law that they can do and cannot do. You know, they're not gonna be able to go buy a acreage someplace else, or it has to be spent in that area. It's gotta be spent for improvement, it's gotta be spent for the good of all the people that's in the district that's created. So, it's gotta be public benefit out of it as well.
How do you ensure that
It's,
that happens if you can't unelect them?
Well, I think you'll have the right to appoint or not appoint.
Yeah, I mean, the
Those
appointments would
folks
be
to the
for 2
authority.
years, so it's not like they'd sit on it
So
forever.
it'll be your appointed group at the end of the day, should you go that way.
Ms. Hirschberg?
Okay, thanks.
Tim, the corridor authority, the study you're doing, wasn't one done by EDC? Seems like I have something in the file. Maybe Nancy
You
knows.
probably have, see, I think you and I probably
We-
got involved in that about the same time, and I heard that there was they commissioned a study at one point in time. I think, was it Beckett Rader that might have done that for you? But I've never seen that study. I've never seen any of that information. I didn't know where it resides.
The study never materialized. We did contact them, we had people come in. In fact, Tim was a part of the expertise that we had, but before that ever materialized, the EDC was not dissolved, but uncommissioned, or whatever the word is.
Well,
Sorry.
the other group that was there,
Inactive.
the other group that was there was Aaron Purdue and Associates. It wasn't a corridor study, but it was the study of development for temperance. And that was probably early 2000s, like 02, 03 maybe.
Right. Oh, no, the one I'm talking about was since 2012. Actually, TAC was a part of that, too. Was a part of that whole discussion and bringing that together. But, like I say, the EDC was, what did you say, Paul?
I want Al, you need to take an opportunity too to kind of clear up what you and Lamar were, going at each other about a little bit.
I have not had a discussion
Hold on, I just
about
want to say
Section
that
8.
you're not going after people to find affordable housing. People
No.
come to you with an idea for that board, and you talk
Exactly.
to them. So I just want that to be clear.
Right, and Mishta has other programs other than
We don't need to get
Section
into it
8.
anymore. We just, I just wanted that to be clear that
Mishta is even doing commercial
people
development.
come to Al on the board all the time with ideas, so. Okay, any more discussion on the board?
So that's all.
Kind of what's going on, any rumors? Okay, Bedford Township's not buying buildings and bulldozing them, okay? I just want that to be clear. You guys aren't doing that, okay? Just
Nope,
want to make sure. A lot of rumors going on about this board, so.
Well, that's why it's good to have these kind
Oh,
of
absolutely.
discussions at the public meeting.
Yep. So any more questions? Okay, thank you guys very much.
Great, thanks.
Okay, number 5, public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale. This in regards to 8D on the agenda. 60 years ago, I was a young junior high school student in New York. We wore uniforms back in those days. Teacher would have us in homeroom, and she'd take attendance of about 40 of us. And then after that, we'd stand up and pledge allegiance to the flag and stuff. And at that time, there was no under God in that pledge. Then she would tell us to sit down, be quiet, close our eyes. And then she would grab a book from the top of her desk. And this is what she would say. She'd say, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he had founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Or who shall stand in his holy place? He that had clean hands and a pure heart, who had not lifted up his soul in the vanity, nor sworn deceitfully, he shall receive the blessing of the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation." Those words banged around in my brain when I was 13 years old in junior high school. And then that same year, I stood in front of my confirmation class, and I had to say verbatim, I said, "For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of the joints and marrow, and is the discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart." Those words bounced around in my head as a junior high school kid. You can put as many officers as you want in a high school, but if God isn't watching over that place, it doesn't make a difference. You know how I know that? Because the word that I just read from you came from King Solomon. This is what he said: "Unless God watches over the city, the watchman watches in vain." That's what he said, the wisest guy that ever lived, according to Scripture. And then his brother, or his father said this, King David said this, he said, "Some trust in horses and some trust in chariots, but I will trust in the name of the Lord." You can put as many things as out there you want to protect our kids, but if you're not praying for them, it doesn't matter.
Thank you for your comments.
Amen.
Any more comments from the public?
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance. I was going to talk about the appointment, but we got that taken care of. After attending 2 of the COW meetings and hearing how much of our rainy day funds have been depleted in the last year and what our obligations are going to be for the upcoming year, I have concerns. No, the sky's not falling. But I do believe that the raises that are being brought up tonight should be set aside until we've had full public disclosures on the upcoming budgets and the changes. There's talk that maybe some employees will have to be let go. I also want to make a comment. I have been negated as far as the downtown Temperance issue. It's too bad that Mr. Pryor didn't share that it's Mr. Decker Jr. has done the favor of buying the laundromat to clean it up for his business. And as far as anybody else, please seek to see the list of the members. There are a lot of guests that show up and do have a lot of pull on these committees. And there was a study. Aaron Purdue was the person who was called in to do a beginning study, and Beckett and Rader was who we did have the study done. The problem was it wasn't completed, and I won't go into that tonight. So if anybody wants to know, and I was present at a meeting where the conversation was that the best thing for Temperance was to bulldoze down the buildings. The person wasn't aware I was sitting in the back corner. And if you all recall the rumor early on that someone had bought up the corner and was going to tear it down, Maggie's, in order to put in a Walgreens, it goes to show you the tactics that are currently being used within this township to intimidate people, and I don't like it.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, moving on to 8A, request for approval of vouchers for payment.
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General fund in the amount of $166,808.74. Fire district, $5,799.72. Police fund, $95,750.91. Park fund, $2,908.56. 55. Library fund, $5,042.91. Downtown Development Authority, $962.50. Sewer O&M Fund, $1,929.99. Trust and Agency Fund, $763 for a grand total of $279,966.32.
I'll support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Oh, he coughed. I couldn't
Sorry.
hear.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item B, request for approval to change the existing standard lighting contract with Consumer Energy to convert the mercury vapor streetlights to high-pressure sodium fixtures.
This was sent to us from Consumers Energy. They want to change the rest of the bulbs out of the street lights. These are mostly in the subdivisions now, and then there are some over the road in the intersections. This will save us more money on our consumers' bills. The last time they changed them out, it saved us quite a bit. This will just reduce that a little more. So I'd like to make a motion that we authorize Consumers Energy to change the standard lighting contract for the street light replacement in Bedford Township as presented.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion? Ms. Tinneberry?
It says general service unmetered lighting. Someone asked me if these are the ones that stay on all the time.
No.
They're supposed to go out, come on at night?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what unmetered means? I mean, why wouldn't they meter it? How are you going to be charged?
I'm not sure why they call it that. These are the street lights that we collect for, so maybe that's why they call them that, but they wouldn't know that. We only have those resolutions because most of them are in the
Yeah.
subdivisions that pay for the street lighting.
Yeah, I'm in a subdivision. I don't want mine unmetered.
Maybe some of the lights in the intersection are unmetered because
Oh.
they stay on all the time, because they're replacing a few of those too, but a majority of these lights will be the street lights in the subdivisions.
Okay, all right. Well, you'll keep track of making sure that they don't get raised, run up there high. All right, thanks.
Hey, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. 8C, request for approval of a cost recovery ordinance. Mr. Goldsmith, this has been a long time coming, so we thought we'd let you kind of explain where we're at with it.
Sure. We have several ordinances within the township that allow the township to recover costs for services provided by our fire department. Others are more specific, such as for our burning ordinance. This is a general cost recovery ordinance that would allow the township to recover costs under certain conditions or certain circumstances. Extraordinary costs that are incurred by the fire department in the carrying out their various duties. And I'm sure when you review the ordinance, you notice that in most situations, the cost to be recovered would be recovered from the insurance company that insures the residence or resident where the call originated from. So it's an ordinance that would allow costs to be recovered for our fire department responding, for instance, to motor vehicle accidents where extrication equipment has to be used, or individuals need extraordinary care or assistance in those circumstances. It also addresses, as you would see, excessive requests for emergency assistance, in certain circumstances, false alarms, a hazardous material incident or emergency. It passes the costs along to the responsible or negligent party. An illegal fire, a bomb threat, threats of harm to oneself or others, structure demolitions, utility line failures, structure fires, particularly that are caused by negligent action of someone, and then negligent damage to any township water or sewer line. I'll mention this. Chief Massengill mentioned to me before the meeting that he would like a standby provision added to subparagraph L under the definition section under public safety or fire emergency incident. And I think it's a good idea. He gave me an example of over in the Lenawee County area where there's large public gatherings from time to time for at MIS for concerts and so forth, where although we don't have that type of venue within our township, there are times that we might have a fairly large community gathering, and the township is asked through its fire department or by its fire department to have standby equipment there, emergency equipment and so forth. So he asked me if we could add that to that definition and then have the ability anyhow to charge back for that type of provision. And I guess I see no reason why that would not be appropriate under the circumstances, and will allow the township to recoup costs from the organization that might be having that special event, where they come to us and ask us to have equipment there and to stand by and have our fire department officers there standing by. So that's what the ordinance is intended to achieve, to allow the assessment of costs under special or certain circumstances. It gives authority to the chief in assessing those costs. It also provides for an appeal process for someone who is assessed a cost to appeal whatever the assessment decision may have been by the chief. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, any discussion from board members, or the chief, or for Mr. Goldsmith, Mr. Fredericks?
In a situation you just brought up where some agency organization asks for a standby, the first thing in terms of obligation is the township pays the salaries. So then we would have to take the next step of trying to find who is responsible to reimburse us for those salaries. The second thing I have a question on, and I'm going to support this, by the way, so you can run around with this administrative nightmare. In no-fault insurance, the two cars bang into each other at the intersection. Does their insurance cover our showing up at the site?
Typically, no.
That's what I thought.
Yes, typically, no. And so And in some cases, and I think I think the chief is really focusing in on extraordinary cases where, let's give you an example, a drunk driver disregards a light at an intersection, T-bones somebody, and our fire department might be there for hours. Extricating someone who's
Jaws of
trapped,
life and all
the
that,
jaws of life, trapped in a motor vehicle. The responsible party for that and/or if they'll be charged for that, I guess, in a
And
simple
something
way
I
of
want
saying
you to explain too, because I got a call about a gentleman's shed burning down. And he said that he got $1,400 less back on his insurance claim than he would have gotten if we didn't collect, from the cost recover. And the way you explain it is a lot different than that.
Sure. So there's a lot of different.
You could pull it up if you want.
A lot of different facets to this. By and large, we've had a cost recovery ordinance in some form for a number of years. Initially, when we started looking for this, it was a way to recoup, or primarily the initial look was to recoup from the utility companies when we're out on standby for hours and hours after storms. When we inquired about that, about a number of months ago, we inquired about that, and they said, yeah, send us a cost recovery ordinance. It says that you can recoup for this, and they've got a fund balance that they pay out of. So initially, when we looked at it, we said, oh, it's not included in our current cost recovery to add the power lines down and things like that. So that's when we started looking at this. And then while we're addressing this, we also wanted to address a number of other things. We've got cost recovery, for instance, for hazardous materials, and we recently used that. We had a situation a number of months ago where the expense was on us as a township and as a fire department for a little over $3,000 because of a hazardous materials incident. We're able to recover those costs from the insurance company or from the trucking company that caused the incident so that there's no burden on our taxpayers. We also look at it and have been successful with cost recovery for some structure fires and some longer incidents where we're asking the homeowners, we'll send them out through our cost recovery and through the existing fee schedules, if they would submit that to their insurance for coverage. And most insurance policies, like a homeowner's policy, includes a certain amount for fire protection that will pay out to a fire department. So our concern, and we've addressed that, if an insurance company doesn't cover that, or if the policy doesn't cover that, we wouldn't pursue our homeowners for that added cost. If the insurance policy includes coverage for fire suppression activities, we just ask that they submit it so that we can recover some of the costs of it. It's a big benefit to us because as we're trying to fund equipment, we're trying to fund the manpower and replace, in some instances, if we've got hose that was damaged or things that were damaged as a result of an emergency incident, it allows us to recover some of that money from the insurance companies. So up to, we've been pretty successful in the past probably year or so with our recovery efforts, but we know that if we improve upon and update the cost recovery ordinance, we'll be able to do a better job recovering from utilities, utility companies, and some other, like the standby events. While we don't see necessarily having to use that standby coverage, and the example we did use with MIS with a concert, if somebody came in and said, hey, next year we're going to bring in 60 or 80,000 people over a weekend into your township, and our insurance company requires fire protection coverage, to have the ability to cover the cost for that and not burden our taxpayers with it would be a huge benefit. So,
Okay. Any more questions, discussion? Ms. Stenberry?
I totally agree with the extreme. I'm a little concerned with some of the other wording in here, though. The false alarm. I mean, we have people that have alarm systems. They're gone for the winter or on vacation, and their alarm goes off for some reason. You know, I'm concerned that that would be no fault of their own, and why would they? It says the senior person responding has the opportunity to decide, and I'm not sure I agree with that.
yet again, we would, or at least to have them recommend some cost recovery. So this is used, and this isn't a new model. You've got to imagine that every time a false alarm call comes in, there's costs associated with it when we send a crew out to check. This wouldn't be something that was utilized frequently for a false alarm. You're having trouble with your system. What we might see, and that would also go in with another section there that addresses 5 or more calls for service. So if there was a problem with the alarm system where the humidity got up, there was some adjustments that were wrong, and consistently 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day it was tripping alarms, we certainly have a duty to act as a fire department and go out there 3, 4, 5, or 6 times a day if they're having trouble with it. At some point, we might say, listen, this has been going on for weeks. You've got to get your alarm company out here to identify the problem that's causing dozens of false alarms.
I understand that.
Or we must recover some cost.
I'm not talking about 5 or 6 times. I'm talking about people being gone, and they're not, the same way with this, I don't understand threats of harm to oneself or others. I mean, what?
So that would be...
Those are our residents.
Well, that would be similar to, let's say we had to be on standby for a significant amount of hours for some type of terrorist activity, like a bomb threat, and we had crews that were standing by for 30 or 40 hours. And again, township residents were being forced to incur the expenses of having a full fire department deployment on standby because of a bomb threat or, in the world we live in, unfortunately, a hostage situation or something like that.
But the wording here doesn't talk about that. It talks about, you know, I mean, it doesn't limit it to that. I'm certain you could find a lot of extravagant or far-reaching situations, but my concern is the wording is not conducive to that. It doesn't say anything about that. My other question is, we have a burning ordinance. This talks about illegal fire. Are the two compatible, or is the person going to be charged on the burning ordinance and then through this?
No, our burning ordinance specifies fees, but that's for a violation of that ordinance specifically. So if there was a violation of that ordinance, and if there was going to be a fee charged, it would be done under that ordinance and not under this ordinance.
Well, they're both illegal fires. It doesn't say that either. And then it goes on further to say on page 5, no resident of the township at the time of a response to a public safety or fire emergency incident shall be responsible and or liable for the expenses of the emergency response over and above the amount of the insurance available. So does that apply back here to the illegal fire and the false alarm and, you know, threatening to take my life? I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that that the whole thing fits together well for the residents. That, you know, it's something that can be charged upon residents based on what's written here. And I don't know. What about, I hear a lot about the calls from nursing homes about people falling out of bed in the night 4 and 5 times. Is that, you're going to charge that back? The person in the bed or the nursing home?
Medical billing would be a little bit different because we've got to follow the insurance company's mandates and rules. So it's not necessarily that easy because right now the insurance companies won't pay for, at least not for us, for lift assist or things of that nature. If it is, it's a small amount, and that would go to the primary ALS service if they build out. But so it's a, while similar, it's a bit of a different application. I might also add that I think the provisions of the appeal process that are being added into this, while I certainly wouldn't expect, and I can assure you that I wouldn't expect that anybody in the current department would take advantage of this, the ordinance, but I think that hopefully if 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road there was some concern, the appeal process would lend itself to a resident coming in and saying, I feel that I'm being unfairly treated by the township, here's why, and have an avenue to have that addressed.
Okay. And then the money collected, does it go into the fire fund or into the general fund?
It would go into fire.
It goes to the fire fund? It really doesn't state that here.
No, it's collected, to be collected by the treasurer's office, and would be up to the board to determine where that money would go. So I don't think it needs to be in this particular ordinance, but it needs to be determined by the board where you want that money.
Each time?
I wouldn't say each time. I think you need to have a
Oh.
general policy on that.
Okay.
Mr. Fredericks?
I have one more issue I wasn't quite done, and that is the appeal process. I think 30 days is too short. I'd like to see 60 because you get the bill to them. They're trying to figure out who they should call, who they want to talk to. There might be lawyers involved, so 60 days might be a better time than 30. And one more thing is Mr. Supervisor, I guess the question becomes, what kind of reports are we going to get so that we can kind of manage how this moves forward and see if this ordinance has to be tweaked or we have to do some reinvestigation or looking at this. So I would recommend something that you might work with the chief and have some reports to the board from time to time so that we can see how this goes forward. I don't see a lot of them come flying in here. I don't think there'll be a book full every month. But from time to time, Mr. Supervisor, it might be to the advantage to have the chief make a report on what he's doing. And again, my last comment, as I said earlier, I think the appeals process is way too short for our citizens. Or in fact, it may be too short for a trucker whose insurance company is in East Bugdung, who knows where. And so by the time all that gets taken care of, I'm not sure that that's 30 days is sufficient. I'd like to see 60. That's my thought. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, what would be the board's pleasure? Chief Massengill identified a couple of changes to me before the meeting that he would like to see incorporated, which I believe are reasonable, and that's based on his years of experience. So if it would be the pleasure of the board, we could incorporate some of these suggestions that have been made by the board members tonight and bring it back at the next meeting, or that might be the best thing to do, because what I was going to do, if the board were to approve this ordinance tonight, was at next meeting present you with a resolution with the fee schedule to adopt. So maybe we could do both at the next board meeting, and then Adam and I could incorporate those several minor changes to make it better.
Do you want the board to email questions to chief or to yourself of the changes?
I would say both, and then Adam and I can work together and get it
Nancy,
back
you
in
good with
front of
that?
you
Just
next,
send both of them?
next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is, having worked in a jurisdiction that had cost recovery would be, I think it would be helpful in that we've kind of reinvigorated this process to have some type of quarterly mechanism whereby the board can just take a look and we have an idea of what's going on. The other issue, I'll email you, but it has to do with a thought on the funds going into the general first and then cycling back to fire to avoid the inference of this is somehow a self-sustaining revenue generation mechanism. So.
Okay. Mr. Fredericks?
I move that we postpone further work on this cost recovery ordinance to the next full meeting of the board, at which time we could also look at the schedule.
Thank you.
Okay.
Support?
Motion, support, discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peron?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 8D, discussion on sharing the cost of a deputy with the Bedford Public Schools. Dr. Carl and Sergeant Pauly, if you can come on up. About a month or so ago, Dr. Carl had called me about this opportunity with sharing a deputy, and I said I think it's a good idea. I think the safer our schools are, the better, and I think we should be a partner in that. You know, we had talked a little bit about how it would look like, you know, when we would see him and how he would rotate. But the partnership was really with you and the Sheriff's Department. We would just be sharing that cost. As you can see, our share is the $42,000. But if you'd like to kind of just give us your
Sure.
sense on it.
First, I'd like to address Mr. Tinsdale's comment about it's not enough to just put officers in schools. I can assure you there's not a day that I wake up that I don't pray for the safety of our students, my own children at home, every student in Bedford Public Schools. And we all realize that. Since my tenure here in the district, I've enjoyed a lot of small successes, but I've also dealt with some tragedies. Familiarization with the tragedy that took place in Florida with the shooting at Parkland. One of our staff members was affected by that and the loss of her brother. That anytime those events happen in public schools, it changes the way we do things. For that day, for that week, for the next year, after the Columbine shooting, nothing has been the same since that point. It's my responsibility as a superintendent of schools to secure our buildings, also to create a learning environment that's conducive to teaching and students being comfortable in that location. After our last Parkland shooting incident, we had a lot of conversation. We worked with the State Police Department, the Monroe County Sheriff Department. I sent a survey to our high school students regarding safety and security. I created a survey for our community to complete, as well as our current staff members at every building. And one of the, almost across the board, we came out about a 6 out of 10 on feeling secure. It's about where I thought we'd come out, actually, and it's almost about where the average across the county is. And that's on their perception of how secure we are. We've allocated our last pennies of our former sinking fund to secure a area of the high school this past month, as well as to start the process for another secured entrance for our Smith Road Elementary building. So we've done everything we can with our resources. The district used to have 2 resource officers or school liaison officers that we partnered with the Deputy Sheriff Department. Through cutbacks, we've had to cut back to 1. In those surveys, across the board, almost unanimously, the number one thing that helped our students, community, and our staff feel safe was the presence of a liaison officer in the classrooms, in the programs, in the building. The problem is that we have one location where junior high and high school, we have the building, 2 buildings on one site, and that's where Deputy Lestock is currently located. He does travel throughout the district, but that's really where he's stationed at, because that's where his office is at. What we're proposing is that we add a second liaison officer, and we would partner in the same similar contract with the Sheriff Department. If their board agrees, our board agrees, and of course, your esteemed board agrees. The contract that we currently have is that we pay 100% of our individual salary for the 66.6% of the time school's in session. When school is not in session, on breaks, on summer break, Deputy Lestock patrols this area. He's in Bedford, except for when he's training or if he takes vacation. He also takes vacations during the year when we're on break. This proposal for this board and to the township would be that we add a second liaison officer, similar to some other communities have done, and that we share the cost at 50%. So we pay about 84% or $84,000. The cost would be $42,000 to the district, $42,000 to the township. And when he's not in session with our school district, he would be in the county or in the township, and he would be moving around the township, just as Jeremy Lestock is currently. In addition, just as with our current contract, anytime there's an incident that's major, our officer can be pulled at any time. He can go to traffic violations if there's an incident. He can go to a traffic accident. He can be called at any time, and we understand that. We want him to secure our township. So that's really where we came up with this idea and this concept. I know there's a lot of legislation that's being pended right now that's on the floor at the House. If they do supply money from the state or federal levels, that would change this, and you would proportionally get some money back, as we would. But if that doesn't change, and I don't have a lot of faith right now that we're going to see that for the 18-19 school year, we'd like to have this in place, if possible, of course.
Just a quick question for Sergeant Pauly is, with the vehicle situation with this particular officer, we wouldn't be supplying anything to do with that. That would come from the sheriff's office, correct?
Correct, that would come from the county, yes.
So that would, be a savings there too. Any discussion from board members on this or any
Could you
questions?
say that again?
About the vehicle. Bedford
Okay.
Township wouldn't have to supply a vehicle,
Okay.
which is a plus.
My proposal is that we keep Deputy Lestock at the secondary location where he's at. Sorry. Deputy Lestock would remain at the secondary location, and a new officer would be stationed at our 3 elementary buildings. And so he would, or she would float between each building every day, so that they would be on the roads, they'd be in the community as well, not just inside the buildings.
Yeah. I mean, just my 2 cents on it. I love the idea of the partnership. I think the safer our schools are, to me, it's economic development. People want to see safe schools. I believe people will move here because of it. So to me, I think would be a great partnership. The fact that we do have them in summers and we have them roughly, 40, 36% of the time or whatever it is, 34% of the time is,
33.4, but those are the busiest times of the year because students aren't in session. So they are also in the community spending time.
Just for board members, you all have the packet. As far as monies, we talked with Mr. Manning. Mr. Francis, the monies is available. We were able to save a little bit out of the sheriff's department's budget this fiscal year, and I believe that, with the vehicles we have, the 4 vehicles we have, we would need to replace them for a few years or a couple years, I would think, because they're roughly all right around 22,000, 28,000, 34,000, 40-something. So they're all lower mileage at this point, so
That's
where
correct.
that's where we've seen the savings. So the money would just be taken from that and basically be pushed into that, so. Ms. Tinneberry?
Well, I'm going to sound like the bad guy, but we've just had budget hearings, budget workshops, and we determined that we were trying to cut $300,000 out of the budget. Every department tried to cut their budget to some extent, so I'm concerned about coming up with even $40,000 that we couldn't cut before. So, we have deputies already. Why can't just the deputy occasionally go, the deputies that we have, make stops at the schools? And like was said, there's 5 buildings. One deputy, my husband taught in Bedford for 40 years, and they had a liaison officer, 1. From my understanding, it was 1 for 40 years, and that seemed to be sufficient. And I understand that maybe the world is different. I'm older. Things are happening differently, but I don't know. I just think that 1 more deputy isn't going to solve any problem that could occur. Whoever wants to do harm is going to find the school where there isn't a deputy and do their business there. So my pointed question here is, this is a contract between the township and the school board. Is that correct?
This is it. Well, yes.
So where is the sheriff contributing? Why isn't it a 3-way?
Well, it actually, if you want to cover it, it can be.
Technically, it is. The county would be picking up 33% of, currently right now with Deputy Lestock. The school pays 66.6%, the county picks up the rest. So technically, there is that cost share, and at least for the last 5 years, I can't speak before that, that deputy's been assigned to Bedford during spring break, summer break, Christmas break. So in effect, you received a net officer for that time.
Well, he's assigned, but as our contract says, they can go anywhere in the county. They're not just, they don't stay there 24/7.
With any contract that we have throughout the county,
We put that in there, we kind of reserve that right in case there's a major incident in Ida. We're going to send everybody. We don't care where they come from. And that's standard language in all of our
Sure,
contracts.
and I agree with that, I understand that, but I don't see a portion of the cost here. It's just between,
The contract would be between, for our purposes, it would be between us and the school. I think what we're talking here is,
so you're paying 40,000, he's paying 40,000, and we're paying
Well, the
40,000.
total cost of an officer is what, 118,000, something
That's
like
what I mean.
that? Okay, we're paying
That's dependent
84,000 between the school and the township. So they're covering that difference, correct?
yes, and that cost is dependent upon the actual officer, or the actual deputy that gets, I guess, appointed. We have a two-tier system. Tier 1 deputies make more than Tier 2. So that could fluctuate or change.
I just want to say one quick thing on the vehicles. I mean, we can put our vehicles wherever we want. We can tell them to go park at Smith Road all day, but I don't think that's the point of us contracting with our deputies. We want them in our neighborhoods, and so, I mean, you know, that less stock is designated for the schools. Mr. Clements?
Well, to self-tell myself, I think I've been pushing about as hard as anybody here for trying to reduce the budget. So I struggle with the 42,000, but it stops right there. I was a school resource officer, and I think one of the things in listening to the conversation is it's natural to assume that when they're at the school, they're not ours. When they're on the road, they're ours, and nothing could be further from the truth. When they're at school, they're ours because they're protecting our kids. They're teaching our kids. Monroe County, Michigan, our country has narcotics problems that a lot of people could argue you've probably never seen before. And I can tell you in my time as a school resource officer, it wasn't the arrests I made or the traffic collisions that I did in the parking lot. It was the building a rapport with students during their general movement in the school, during programs, to be able to build a relationship so that home problems where abuse were taking place, to ward off potential narcotics issues. And so I think there's a lot of intangibles that are tough to list on paper, but I think are absolutely part and parcel of the value this officer would bring. And I think when you look at the 33, 33, 33, that's a much more palatable pill to swallow than if it was a 50-50 split.
Mr. Fredericks?
The contract that is before us is for 3 years. I already know that a 3-year contract, the last year would not be binding on a subsequent board. There are, however, provisions that we can walk away in 90 days. So I'm willing to see how this works. And if it gets out of whack somehow, I'm not sure how it could, but it might, then we can walk away in 90 days. The thing that a little bit concerns me is we know each officer, sergeant, is entitled to 35 days off. I don't want those 35 days, all of it on us in the summer, because that's when vacations come along. And so I think we'll have to kind of work with you on that.
Currently, as it sits, because they have their own labor agreements, Jeremy, for example, I'll use Jeremy because he's our only officer now, and I'm just going to pick on him for a while, but with his children and taking vacations, sometimes he takes vacations when we're on break, sometimes he takes a vacation, or training for that matter, when we're in session, and they do backfill. So that we receive another officer in that time. So it's, I could tell you that they don't save, well, at least ours currently does not save his vacation for the summertime. I think he actually enjoys the weather and likes to be outside at that point. In addition, I also have our contract that we currently have with our, with the county that outlines the 33.4% that they pay, if I could, may I share it?
Well, Mr. Supervisor, maybe we should have some kind of I don't want to go amend our contract. We just spent hours talking about that and doing, I don't know how many hours of stuff going back and forth. But maybe we should have some kind of a letter between us and the sheriff department so that we understand that when the school is on break, that whoever the person is, he or she, who is assigned from our side of this thing, is in fact assigned to us. So we have actually one extra person then from time to time on duty, which I think is a great deal for $42,000, and we get them about 4 months, 3.5 months out of the year. So I think maybe we should make sure that we have a letter, and it doesn't have to be a contract in the standard sense of messing around with our contract. I don't want to do that. But maybe a letter back and forth that says whatever. Does that work, Sergeant?
Well, I'm not going to say it won't work. I mean, obviously, I'll have to bring these concerns back to my department. However, I can tell you, for as long as I've been around, 20-plus years, 22 years, the deputies of each school district has been assigned to, whether it's Bedford, whether it's the Monroe area, whether it's the airport area, Jefferson, when they had a school, they were assigned to those areas, those districts. There will be no change in that.
Okay, I know Joe Lambert used to be one.
Correct.
And in the summer, he would be over here from day to day sometimes.
He would report out of this substation with a county car. He would. Now again, I'm not going to promise you that the deputy will be within the confines of the
I accept
the township.
I understand.
100% of the time, but
we've already beat that thing to the ground.
Sure.
So in any event, all I'm suggesting is that maybe we just add a little note or something to make sure that we understand and they understand that they're assigned to us when the school is not in session. Just to cover up.
Ms. Tinderberg.
Let's see.
Is he done?
Oh, yeah, well, Mr. Clements brought up the issue of the budget. This was not put on the budget, so the money will have to come from the general fund balance, the rainy day fund, because we've already somewhat solidified the budget for next year, so it comes, I guess we have to amend the budget that we haven't just finished, so thank you.
Ms. Tinderberg.
With regard to what Mr. Clements said, I totally understand the value. As I said, my husband taught in Bedford for 40 years, and he would occasionally explain things that happened in the school that were taken care of easily because of the liaison officer, and he did form a wonderful relationship with the students. It's not about the value, it's about the budget in my mind. And the schools, we didn't contribute as a township to that liaison officer. You know, if the school's budget is tight, our budget is tight. And the other thing is, it's not pending legislation yet, but there is proposals going forward at the state level to be able to support by funds this type of thing in all the schools in Michigan. And I think we're being hasty to jump forward. And of course, it would be on my head if something happened, in a month. But I think that we need to be reasonable. I have a problem with the 3 years as well. If this goes through at the state level and the funding comes, I don't know that we would get a refund. It seems to me the way the state works, that would not be forthcoming. So I just have a concern. They do have one deputy, and there are other options that haven't even been discussed. What about retired police? We have a lot of retired police in this community. I mean, that opportunity exists too. Dundee uses retired policemen. So I just, instead of jumping into this right at this time, I just think that there are other options that should be pursued, and if those don't work out, then maybe at a later time after we find out what's going on at the state.
Well, we're definitely not jumping into it, so if you want to touch on the insurance issue, why we need
Sure.
sheriff's deputy, go ahead.
Sure. The way that our insurance policies are set up is that in order for us to have a retired officer, or for us to have a retired security or ex-military, those are all viable options, I believe. Many are tactically trained. Unfortunately, our insurance carrier will not allow us to do so. We'd have to look at different options because they would be covered under our insurance. There was an incident recently in the state of Michigan where a off-duty officer had their pistol go off at a sporting event instead of a basketball court. And if somebody were to be injured, the liability falls on us, not under the sheriff's department. I like the liability to be with the experts. The other reason that I would propose that we remain with our active duty officers is the resources they have at their fingertips. If I want to go and get something checked out by a physician, I'm not going to go to my retired doctor. I'm going to go to somebody who's practicing in a hospital with rights. And I respect officers, retired officers, active duty officers immensely. I wish that I had my neighborhood full of them. And I hope that they come and they work with our schools and they volunteer and they're being part of our community. But when it comes to protecting our children, I want somebody who has the resources of the Monroe County Sheriff Department at their fingertips. And that's really why we've elected to remain with this type of agreement. And in terms of the legislation, I've been lobbying along with my superintendent counterparts across the state for legislation for funding. When something like this is, and we've been assured, of course, there's no real assurance in law and legislation, but if there is some refund or some grant allocation, and depending how it's structured, if it's not structured where we can give the funds back, we would execute this 90-day removal from the contract and get the township out of that so we could take those grant dollars and not cost either of our entities any funds. I mean, I do think that something will be done. I think what's going to be done is probably going to be more in the line of locking buildings down and providing training. I don't think it's going to be the cost that is so large to fund officers for every building that has been talked about.
Mr. Steiner?
Started off with, you described, or Mr. Pauly described about these officers, and the first thing everybody thinks about these days is an event like what happened in Florida in the schools back when Columbine. So the first thing people think about is guns and active violence like that. I mean, it's a big thing because when it does happen, it's a huge event. But the bigger event right now is the drug situation. And I mean, you hear a lot of kids that if they get comfortable enough to talk to an officer, believe me, that prevents a lot. Sometimes that also helps prevent from the gun violence as well, because that's where a lot of that, drug ends up, is in gun violence too. And respecting to what Mr. Clement said is the budget. We have to look at it. There's been a number of concerns over what our budget is. There are some ways that we will be voting on a budget in the upcoming month. And I think that we still have some ways that we can make some suggestions to maybe change that a little bit. And you just took the words out of my mouth on the 90-day clause. I was going to say, if the state does come down with any kind of funding, you execute a clause in the contract and get the township out of that, so we're not paying for something that is duplicating those funds. But from the safety standpoint, I don't disagree with Mr. Tisdale. The people need to look at a higher power to take care of us, but in this case, some of that next highest power is some people with authority that are there to protect, they're there to recognize. Like you said, they're trained very well. Again, I absolutely respect ex-military, ex-officers. They did their jobs well. But again, with the Sheriff's Department, we've got a backfill mechanism. There's a way to cover those vacations and those training hours, et cetera. So it sort of falls along with some other discussions we've had. I'm not going to digress backwards. I think that we can look at this, and then the other thing, as Mr. Frederick said, I think a 3-year could be an issue because we can't buy another board. So maybe we look at changing that to a 2-year.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
I got a more basic question. It's my understanding that a township can only spend money to buy an item or buy a service. This is not an item, it'd have to be a service. I don't see anywhere in the contract where it defines what service would be provided to the township for its $42,000. it says what the service is that's going to be provided to the schools, 40 hours a week during regularly scheduled school year. Period. Doesn't say anything about the rest of the year that the township, in effect, would be paying for. Should it? That would make me feel better to have at least some definition of what the service is. And I think we all have a pretty general idea what that is, but we're signing a contract, it ought to be there. It ought to be clearly stated.
That's something we can address. Ollie?
Again, you know, the county's picking up 33%. I think the service is actually provide, or I guess this is providing that deputy into the schools with Bedford kids. I think it's generalized police services within the township. I mean, the deputy will be going to all 3 buildings. The deputy will be educating the kids, the 5th graders in DARE. I think we're still going to continue with that program. I'm sure there's going to be some other initiatives that are now available for this officer to implement, whereas Jeremy Lestock just doesn't have the time because he mainly is dealing with the high school. The benefit will be for Bedford kids, like I think Paul had said that. I don't know if that answers your question about service, but the deputy will remain in Bedford, save for emergent situations.
Ms. Tinderberry?
Well, just to comment on that, the service may be to the school, but the general fund money coming out of our tax base has to be a service provided directly to the township. But I believe in consensus, and your comments moved me toward the middle, because this is the first I've seen it. I mean, I know Mr. Peroni didn't want me to say jumped in, but in my mind, it's the first I've seen. I did not know you had done all that background, checked into other things, your insurance. So I'm willing to move to the middle on this, but I would like to see a change in the longevity of the contract. I would like to see 1 year and then we keep going. And my other comment is with regard to all of that. Could the school pay the township for our deputy? And that way it wouldn't be our money. I mean, our money would be going for the service of another deputy.
I think that would be more expensive, actually,
Yeah,
because
'cause
we pay our portion as it currently is with all the other schools, districts within the county is that 66 point.
We would pay the 80/20 at that point
So
if we
why
did that.
wouldn't he pay us the money that he pays to the sheriff?
You'd be losing a officer on the
Because we'd
street.
have to hire another
No.
officer and pay 80% of it.
I know, that deputy that they're talking about would be run through the township. And then they would contribute to one of our deputies for their
Right,
services.
but if it runs through the township, then it comes under the contract that we have with the sheriff, which is an 80-20 split.
Well, I know it's 80/20, but
Right.
we'd be getting some of our money from them. I don't see how.
I think we'd lose on that deal because we're paying, our share is higher than their share is right now. Their share is 66%. Ours
would-
is 80%
They
for our.
would pay us that.
Pardon?
They would pay us that 84,000 or whatever they pay. I don't know, doesn't seem to me like it would be any different, that the same amount of money that they would pay to the sheriff goes to us. And we put that into our general fund and pay that deputy out of our general fund.
When we
That-
began this conversation, I actually did the math on that because that was one of my first proposals, is perhaps add an 11th officer or add one more to the township, and that way it's a clean, just between 2 entities.
Phil, to Paul's point, can we legally do it the way it's written?
I'm comfortable that a service is being provided to the township because it's within the geographical confines of the township, and it's township children that are attending our school system in our schools. So I'm comfortable that we are in fact paying for a service for the benefit of the township residents and township children in our school system, and all those people who on a daily basis visit our school system that are residents of the township. What I would like to further pursue, and Mr. Francis touched on this, and Mr. Frederick touched on this, is to have a letter of understanding with the Sheriff's Department that during the summer session, that deputy will be assigned to patrol Bedford Township or provide services in Bedford Township, whether it be the DARE program or similar other services, so that that just further underscores the fact that we are paying for a service that is being performed for and on behalf of the residents of Bedford Townships, our taxpayers. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Paul, you okay with a letter?
Sure, absolutely.
Paul, is that something we can make happen? A letter of understanding type deal, kind of?
I mean, yeah, I don't believe I'm in position to make that decision at this point, but I'd certainly bring it back, and I'll come back with an answer for you.
Okay. Are we, Mr. Frederick?
One last question, and I suppose the answer right.
Your mic's off.
I don't want to snore. Sergeant, if one of our guys over here needed backup, would the school resource officer be a backup?
Absolutely.
Thank you, there's the service.
Yeah, that was something that was talked about too.
That's in all of
Anytime
our
there's an emergency or
contracts.
something going on, so.
That is just police protocol. If an officer in this jurisdiction needs a backup, I don't care if I mean, it's state police officer. If they need a backup, they're going to send them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I look for a motion. Unless anybody has any more questions?
Are we leaving it the same as it is?
Well, I mean, you can make amendments in the motion for a 2-year or whatever we,
I'll take a stab at it. I'll make a motion that this board enter into an agreement with the Bedford Public Schools to fund a deputy at our cost, not to exceed $42,000 annually, with the understanding that the deputy will be used on school premises during school functions, and when functions are not and normal work hours exist, the deputy will service the Bedford Township. I would further suggest that we enter into a contract of 2 years as to not to bind the hand of a future board,
With a 90-day out.
with a 90-day out as listed currently.
Second.
motion supported, discussion?
Do you really want to fund a deputy? This agreement that we're looking at is to reimburse the school. It's their deputy.
For funding a deputy. How do you want me to change the
Well,
wording, Paul?
It's probably just semantics, but we're
Okay,
not-
so
we're-
what's the alternative, and I'll agree with you.
just enter in the contract at the cost sharing that's shown there.
Perfect.
Would that work?
I accept that, absolutely.
I think, I don't have any problem with this. Funny, I'm a little nervous about where we're gonna get the 42 grand with our current budget issue, but we can still work on that. This won't take effect till the 1st of July, but we have to get at it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely open to the rephrasing to cost sharing with Bedford Public Schools.
Do you
And-
accept the friendly amendment, Mr. Frederick?
Absolutely.
And would you amend it to July 1st, 2018 for a term until June 30th, 2020? Because you said 2 years, but it didn't define when, and this contract says until June 30th, 2021. And so it would need to say 2020, June 30th, 2020.
So July 1/18 to July 1/2020, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, July 1 starts the new fiscal year, so it'd be June 30th is the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So is that all right?
So
Yeah, I would
instead of
accept
21, it'd be 2020.
Yeah.
June 30,
yeah.
That's what I
2020.
said, but
Okay.
it's not a big
I
clue.
just wanted to be sure I understood where you were going.
Mr.
Thank you.
Fredericks, did you,
No, that's what I was just going to say.
Okay.
That's 2 years would be.
Mr.
June
Steiner?
30th.
Mr. Clemens, did you mention the letter of understanding memorandum? I don't recall if you did.
I did not. I thought I captured the fact that when the deputy was not at the school, that they would be performing patrol duties in Bedford. I thought that was just part of my motion.
Okay.
so we're good without going with a letter of understanding then?
I have no problem with that.
I don't
If
have a
somebody wants to
problem with
offer
it
that up as an, I'm not going to also turn it down either.
Mr. Fredericks?
I'd still like to see the letter if it's only just between us. I'd
Okay.
like to see it memorialized.
Okay.
His motion is correct, but I still think we should have the letter to follow up with his motion. Thank you.
Yeah, accept that friendly amendment.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Clement,
Aye.
Mr. Frederick,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery,
Aye.
Mr. Francis.
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni.
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Thank you guys very much. Did you want to say something else, Polly? You good? We'll talk about that.
I will work on the amended contract and share it. So I will get that to you right away. And on behalf of the Bedford Public Schools and our students, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 8E, request for approval to increase the hourly rate for Tom Redmond. Supervisor Cecil, if you can come on up. Are you ready for a beating?
Well, I was just going to say, I didn't bring my shield or my bulletproof vest, so I guess I'm ready. I asked for this simply because currently when Tom was hired, he was hired at a temporary rate of pay as a temporary employee. He's been moved to part-time status. He's done a fantastic job in the ordinance department. As most of you know, the ordinance department is not the same ordinance department you had 5 years ago. It's not the same ordinance department you had 10 years ago. We've been doing quite a few different things. As recently, I've been over to the library myself on my own time after hours, meeting with the homeowners associations, trying to educate our community on the ordinance of this township, which I got a lot of questions. We had about 30 people at that meeting, and they asked quite a few things. Recently, myself and the supervisor, I went to Moongate and spoke to the seniors over there on some of the things that the ordinance department is trying to do for seniors, and also did a presentation on safety for people that were 55 and older. Tom Redmond has been a part of these types of things. As you know, he found a house fire doing the snowbird house checks that we're doing. Tom does a fantastic job. He's a retired sergeant from the Sheriff's Department. He brings 30 years of law enforcement skills. He makes our department more professional, which is what our goal is to provide a professional service within the community. And I would just like to see him brought up to the standard of pay that Officer Pitson is making as well.
Okay. Discussions from board members? I mean, this is something that was brought to us in the budget meetings originally with myself, Paul, and Nancy, and so we just move forward with it, and here we are. So I have no complaints about Tom. He does a great job. He's very professional. So Ms. Tinnevery?
Well, just the fact that we have, tried to follow the personnel policy with regard to the different classifications of employees, I think this should have been done back when he became a part-time employee. So I would like to move that we increase Tom Redmond's, Officer Redmond's pay to $19.38 per hour, effective immediately.
Okay, we have a
I'll
motion.
support.
Motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni.
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say one more thing just for the community. On June 9th, the Ordinance Department is going to be sponsoring a program for the first time called Dog Days of Summer. And what this is going to allow pet owners of dogs to be able to come to Indian Creek Park. We've partnered with the Sheriff Department, Strays of Monroe, to put on a program for the dogs in the area. We're going to have a vet there that's going to have affordable vaccinations for township residents to bring their animals to get them vaccinated. The Monroe County Animal Control is going to be there to take applications for dog licensing. We're going to have our rules there. Again, this is an education process for the community as far as dogs running at large. They have to be on a leash while they're in the parks. So this is just our way of reaching out to the community, and I want to tell everybody that this idea was brought to us by an individual and was assigned to Officer Pitson by myself, and I just want to say that she's done a fantastic job of putting this program together, and we've had a lot of positive feedback so far. We've had different people contacting us wanting to offer up things to volunteer to help out. We've had businesses offering things for the community, so I have seen a positive response to the community to our department. So I just want to say thanks, and again, thank you all for supporting us.
Thank you. Okay, item 8F, request for approval to increase the hourly rate for Kelly Elmer. I'm asking the board to approve a $2 raise for Kelly Elmer. Kelly has become a Michigan Certified Assessing Officer and has been progressing over the last year. Customer service, she's able to provide more detailed information to taxpayers and anyone else that calls or comes to the counter. BSNA, she's entering all sales info, building permits, pre's, and board of review petitions, attending assessing program training for software, and is now more familiar with details of the program and has taken on more data entry responsibilities. Increased work duties due to new cost manual, STC classification code changes, and assisting learning new land division combination application and adding new proposal properties to the assessment role. Kelly got her level 1 probably within the first, Alan, you want to come up to the mic for any question? No, you're good. She got her level 1 within the first few months, and I believe she got a raise with that, and then 6 months later, she received her level 2 and didn't receive a raise because we wanted her to see some more experience. So after that, and I could be wrong a little bit on the dates, but after that, she progressed a lot, and Kelly is a true asset to the assessing department. She's just a joy to be around in general, you know, and brings a lot to that department. So we thought it was a good time after being a roughly, are you coming up now, Alan? That we would bump her up a little bit. So that's why I'm here asking for it. Ms. Tinneberry pushed me as well with it, so here we are. Any discussion, questions?
Did a great job. You're correct. She's a big plus to the department. She's a resident. We are pushing her to learn as much as she can because we have a lot of things coming, major changes coming. She's a joy having, and the timing, I think the last time around was we were coming in for one raise, but she'd already earned the second certification, and she's a pleasure to have in the department. So that's all I have to say
Any
there.
questions or discussion, or comments from Mr. Matlow? Ms. Tinneberry?
She's also very self-motivated. I don't believe she took the classes. I think she did her own studying, and she took the test on her own. So am I correct or not?
We all do. We all have. She took it. Yes, she did.
I'm talking about Kelly.
She also
Did not, we didn't have to pay for her to get this advancement. She was self-motivated and took it on her own. And I think that I would like to move that I don't know what her hourly salary is, but I'd like to move that she receive a $2 per hour raise retroactive to when she got her MCAO, because we do have a policy that when people advance and get another level in their training, they get a raise in pay. So I would like to move that be retroactive.
I disagree with that motion, but we can see what happens. I think she should get the raise as
Okay,
of
there's a
today.
motion on the floor.
ahead.
It
I look
needs a
for a-
second,
I look
and then
for-
you can disagree.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second only for discussion.
Okay. Okay, discussion? Mr. Francis?
What date did she receive that level 2?
It's been on 4 months, something like that, 3 months.
We'd have to check the dates on that,
I mean, it hasn't been awful long, I don't know why we need to go retroactive. It doesn't make sense to me, but Mr. Fredericks?
Well, I'm not going to buy retroactive, and the reason I don't know, we didn't include retroactivity in the budget. We talked about increase in salaries for people, and those salaries were increased as of July 1. I'm not going to support backdating raises to 3, 4, 5 months ago. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't support that. If we want to talk about amending that motion to effective July 1 or June 1, whatever, I'll listen to that. Thank you.
And Kelly would be more than happy with that. Ms. Tinberg?
I only say that because it was an oversight of
No, it wasn't an oversight. It wasn't an oversight
You
at
didn't know
all.
that she got her MCAO and that she
Yeah,
should have
no,
gotten a raise when she got that?
We knew she got it. We were all aware. But we knew that she didn't have the experience she needed to get that bump. So we said, let's let her get some more experience and learn some other areas, and then we'll come back and look at it. This has all been planned. It isn't like an oversight. Okay. So we don't have a second, so.
Do.
Yes, you do.
Okay, a second, I'm just saying, was she gonna amend the motion, or how do we want to go about this?
Was that a friendly amendment?
Were you asking for a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment to June 1st?
June 1st or July 1?
Oh, wait.
I think you
we
said
don't-
July 1.
July 1, I'm sorry, July 1, because
Okay,
that's when the
fiscal
budget
year.
is set.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Accept.
Okay. Discussion? Could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I have one more thing before I leave.
Okay.
This is in regards to the ordinance department and what's taking place there. It is not the same ordinance department. I can tell you that. We have not received, over the years, we've received some pretty hostile phone calls over the years. Very positive response to the ordinance department and how they're approaching things. The other thing too I'm going to mention is it's a phenomenal feel on that first floor with those guys down there now, and I think it was a very good move, so thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Okay, item 8G, request for approval to bid out the township auditing services.
In the budget meetings we've had, it was asked that we start bidding out our professional services, and the auditor was one of them. So I prepared an RFP that we can put out. This is from the MTA, and so I used what they gave me, put our names in it, put some dates at the submission of proposals, which can be changed. I just threw dates in there just so we'd have something completed. And I'm bringing it to the board to see if this is what we want to go forward with. If we do want to go forward, we need to do it right away because we do have an audit coming up soon.
Mr. Peroni?
Steiner?
Trudy, nice job on putting this together. And granted, this is something that would be at the time of a contract, but when we do get to a contract, whether it's with the current firm or another firm, I'd like to see that we get in there that their billing fees must be timely, and we specify what timely really means. Because as we discussed during budget sessions, I mean, we wait forever to get the bill. And then who knows how long, could be 6, 8, 9, 10 months after the fact, and it was budgeted long before that. So I'd like to see that changed.
Mr. Fredericks?
Mr. Francis, I guess my question has to do with where are we with respect, we finished the last fiscal year, not the one we're in now, we finished the last fiscal year audit, which would be 16, 17. 17 and 18 will commence when? Because we won't close the books for
September usually.
September, October. So we're really talking about, it would be for 18, 19 if we were to put a new person in place, right? Maybe 19, 20.
We could get somebody in for this. They would start in September for this fiscal year that we're ending. That's why I said, if we're going to do this, it needs to be quickly.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Francis?
I think this is a good start. It would be my preference to take this under advisement and come back with something at the first meeting in June. I think this one was written at least 10 years ago. Some things have changed in that period of time. Some of the duties and reporting responsibilities have changed. The terminology has changed. And I think that we ought to have that current terminology into it. But this is a great place to start.
Can I ask what terminology we're speaking of? Because MTA told me we could use this.
Yeah, I know, I pulled the same thing off their site, and this is a copy of a live one that I forget the name of the township now. Wait a minute, I do have it. Carrollton Township, Saginaw County.
Yeah, it might not be identical. I know Erie Township has put theirs out for bid, and they're using this document as it stands.
You can do what you want, but
Well,
as
where's
it's
some
written
of
right
them?
now, I will vote against it.
What were some of them?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. What
What were some of the what?
changes that you're talking about?
Well, on the very first page in item number 1, there's a number of 34,000 where municipalities that have population over 34,000 need an audit. That should be 4,000, not 34,000. I think that's just a typo, not a big deal. Further down on the, it's the 5th line from the bottom in that same clause where it says public and private improvement.
Mm-hmm.
What are those? Do we have any of those? There are funds that we have that aren't listed here. For instance, the proprietary and enterprise fund, the sewer fund isn't there. Fiduciary funds are not listed there. They might be assumed to be in the others, but maybe we ought to have them all listed because this is really a contract, or seeking a contract.
So you're asking to list all funds?
Or all types of, yeah. The references that are in this thing as it's drafted refer to American Institute of CPA's documents dated 15 years ago. Those have changed. We either take the reference out or we get the document that's actually in place right now and
I'm
substitute
sorry,
it for that.
where are you at?
Well, you know, when you get this 30 minutes before closing today, it's a little hard to come up with all of them, but look on page, no page. Look in clause number 4. It's a 5-year contract. Do we want a 5-year auditing contract?
I think it's safe to say at this point, we need to table this agenda item, and why don't you two work together on it the next couple of weeks, and we'll add it to the next agenda. I mean, I think you could go on.
I'm not talking about major change. I'm just
No, but I mean,
tweak a
there's
little.
enough tweaking that we can't approve it tonight unless we want to approve it contingent upon,
No.
you know, we don't want to
No,
do that,
we
so.
don't wanna do
I
that.
look for a motion.
I'd make a motion to table this agenda item until the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and supported, discussion? Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Tinnevery?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8H, discussion on contract. I added this. I stumble upon some of these contracts, and the reason I pulled Rawlings Heating was, for one, we can't find a contract that we have with the township that supposedly he has with us. Two, this is 10 years old. You know, the contract with the library, you know, we're spending quite a bit of money. I just want to know, what's the board's pleasure with some of these contracts, like something like this? Do we want to hang on to contracts like this for 10 years? Is that, or do we need to revisit them, say, every 2 years? That we just bid out all contracts? You know, I hear talk about, you know, insurance. Should we be bidding out insurance? Engineering, legal. You know, I get it. We all have reasons why we, personally, I love Phil, love the department, trust them. They have a history on it. Yes, that would be very difficult and have to have a very good reason for us to bid out and lose that. But some of these, like this, I just, I guess I, Mr. Fredericks?
Well, these kind of service contracts, which this one essentially is just a service contract, we could have, a review of these on a regular basis. Ms. Tinvery brought up issues with respect to the sheriff's contract, and I think her points on several of these things make some sense. We should probably be looking at the service contracts for, in this particular case, for the air conditioning systems and chillers and all this kind of stuff. We should be looking at these on a regular basis. 2008 and 2007, a lot of things change, and we don't even know what our costs are based on this. We simply get it was $120 an hour back in '08. We don't know what we're getting today at all. So I think your point's well taken. We should be looking at these service contracts at the minimum on some kind of a regular basis. We could be having a contract with somebody who went out of business and wouldn't even know it. So
I don't think it's that bad, but.
Well, we don't know that.
To dovetail on it, I like where you're leaning, but I would think that, kind of to echo on where I think you're going, that an internal look to make sure it's something we need or should address should be the trigger. Because I'm not sure every single contract that we deal with has to be rebid, reevaluated, reselected annually. But I do think an annual look to make sure it still fits our needs, that probably does make sense.
I just didn't know if we wanted to set parameters, I'm just saying, like the road commission, every single year they have bidding for their tree service, for the roads contracts, for the plowing. I know that's on a bigger level, and I'm not saying we need to do contracts every year on smaller items, but I guess to have something in place that says, hey, every 2 years, we're gonna either rebid it out, something, I guess, so there's not, go ahead, Ms. Fredericks.
2 years might be too soon, but clearly 3. Sometimes a new person coming in has a transition period, trying to figure out what's involved and who's involved and what do I need to do and how does this work and what did the other guy do? So it might be a 3-year.
I guess to the point of.
But your point essentially is, I would look at service contracts like this every 3 years.
I guess internally, I guess that's where it can kind of get out of hand. Yes, you can depend on the internal people to look at contracts, but what if they don't? You know what I'm saying? We look at them, but I think if you have something in place that says we will bid out this every 3 years, and the same company can bid for it again, you just know it's being done. they're competitive, you know, they're going to have to continue to give us that competitive, you know what I mean? Keeps them on top of it, I guess. But I guess I just didn't know, kind of, did we bid out cleaning for the, the library and the township, Mr. Fredericks?
Well, the one you handed us, I guess it started on March 12th, 2008, but there's no termination date, ever. So if we start looking at contracts that have a commencement date and a termination date, somebody's going to come in and say to us, my contract's going to be up in 6 months, what do you want to do?
I think that's the better suggestion, because it creates the trigger on the other side.
Well, yeah, because he's going to say, my contract ends in 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And that would be the triggering influence, rather than we have to struggle through a box of documents. We start putting termination dates on them.
That's a good idea.
And then you have a trigger, because and it may be at the wrong time for us, but at least at the same time, we can talk about maybe 2.5 or 3.5, or there are ways to make contracts. This looks to me as what is called an evergreen. Means it goes on and on and on and on and on until somebody says, wait.
And I'm not saying anybody's doing wrong.
Oh, no.
People get comfortable with contracts, and,
Yeah.
and
My view is we can start talking about putting ending dates on these things. And maybe, like you said, the service agreement here and a service agreement there, we can talk about it.
Like, for instance, every single year we bid out mowing in the ordinance department. We just know every year we bid it out, so, okay, well, Ms. Tenderberry?
Well, this isn't a contract, this is an agreement between Walt Wilburn and Rawlings Heating.
Yeah.
There's no board decision here, there's no signing of the supervisor and clerk, so this is not acceptable in my mind for any kind of a contract. I totally agree with you, I applaud you for bringing this, because I think that it is long overdue, and I agree that with an ending time, it triggers something, but I can tell you there are people out there, heating people, lawn mowing people, they just keep doing their job. They don't care if the contract ran out. I think the impetus has to be on the township as well, and it's pretty easy nowadays to put a reminder in your Microsoft Office and have it pop up for you to know that you need to look at this contract. So keeping a list of all of those, I think, is extremely important. But for the fiduciary responsibility that we're all given, I think, and the fact that we're political people, this is a political organization, it's easy to hire your cousin, your uncle, your neighbor, your friend, but with bringing it to the board and having to bid it out, there's more of a even keel given to everybody having the opportunity if they answer the bid, so.
Mr. Francis?
Why don't we start with getting a list of all the service contracts that the township has? We can all review those, because some we might not want to bid out.
I agree.
But the ones that we do, those are the ones we highlight and get working on, because I think it is a good idea. I hate to agree with Nancy, but she's right.
You're
We need
agreeing
to
with
review
Paul.
them.
You're agreeing with Paul, so make it better, easier for you.
No, I agree, that's part of our responsibility.
Trudy, is that something you can get? Just kind of a list of what we have in place?
I can have one of the girls work on it, but remember, I'm in election mode.
Okay. Nothing.
Steve
nothing
Manning
rush.
would probably.
Well, either way,
find them.
Yeah.
the board is okay with us kind of moving forward here. Just, I mean, we have, we've changed quite a few of them, but Mr. Fredericks?
Just look at the invoices that we've received in the last 6 or 7 months, and that would probably be a good start.
That's right.
Yes, as Mr. Francis stated, if we could get the list, I mean, there's going to be certain contracts that we can categorize too. These need to be 1 year, these are 2, these are 3. But I can tell you why certain companies, as Ms. Tinnery mentioned, if there's not a close date on there, they may not be making top dollar, but if there's no close date on it, they just keep doing their job, and there's no risk of losing your business then.
Okay.
And that's why people don't look at them sometimes.
Yeah. And we've tweaked, I mean, there's been a few things, I mean, like the elevator guy, I think he came, how many times a year, Al? 6 times a year or something like that? It was
Every
like,
month.
every month.
Every
I'm like,
month.
why are you coming every month? I mean, we cut him back to, I think, what was it, quarterly or something? I mean, so we are tweaking things, you know, but it's just some of these stuff. So, okay, all right, we'll move on it then. Number 9, comments from the public, comments limited to 5 minutes. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale, 1308 Brandywine Street. I guess the last meeting of the Committee of the Whole, I guess, was pretty eye-opening to me. I still have a problem trying to figure out why, when we have 10 people assigned to Bedford Township as contract officers, that those 10 people can't stay in Bedford Township, that those 10 people can't log the 1,800 hours per year that they're supposed to do, and then how through the whole year of 2017, they end up over 2,200 hours short of the 18,000 hours that 10 people are supposed to give us. Still haven't figured that out. And I guess I don't know where these people went to. I looked at Frenchtown. I forwarded their information at Frenchtown and stuff and got 10 months for 2017, and I found out that some of the people that were working down here, supposedly as contract officers, are logging hours up in Frenchtown. How can you control the 35 days a year that we're supposed to give them off when they're putting hours in other places and stuff? That's what I don't understand. I guess maybe I'm just not very smart anymore. But those are kind of concerns that I have, and 2,200 hours is an awful lot. This is not like a couple hundred hours where somebody, they have to replace them with someone else. I understand that, but why is there so much backfilling of people that are assigned down here? And as of September 2017, there are only 9 people logging hours in Bedford Township that are contract officers. Only 9. I've got the things there that says there's only 9. In fact, if you look at the answers that they gave us on page 17 and 18, there was only, as of 1/8 of 2018, there was only 9 people who were actually working. One of them was off and has been off for a year that are actually assigned to Bedford. So how can we pay for 10 when we're only getting 9 assigned here? I mean, I just don't understand that. You know, I ran a schedule when I was in the state police. You know, we had so many people to work with, and I realized schedules are sometimes kind of hard to deal with. But we were able to put people out on the road for 24 hours, and if people went to training, we were able to fill them in with other people. I understand that there's a fill-in problem, but I can't understand how you can be 2,200 hours short in a year. That's $95,000. And then we really never addressed the other hours. They posted 150 or 140 hours a day. They never really asked us about doing that. That costs the township money. You know, I think that if you're going to put somebody that's working the road, that's what we're paying them to do, is work the road and to take complaints. You put them over somewhere else, and are you going to backfill for those people? So you're going to have to pay for another 140 hours? So these are questions which I have a problem with, and I think that comes down to really monitoring what's going on. And I hope the next contract with the Sheriff's Department has some pretty tight reins on that. And there needs to be explanations, not a year later or 2 years later or 5 years later, but right at the time that it takes place. And community public service this is the most important thing we do here, is to have fire and police protection. It's not secondary to anything. It's not secondary to the library. It's not secondary to anything. Those are the most important things that you people do on this board, is to provide police and fire protection for us. It should be the #1 priority. If you do nothing else, that's the best thing you've done, because it depends on people's lives out here. And so I'm concerned about that. I hope, I'm not privy to what happened at that contract meeting, but I hope it's a lot tighter than what it is, and I hope that it's not just a footnote every month on the township agenda and stuff, that they can log 45 people on there or 39 people on there, and we don't want to know why the people that are assigned here are not logging the hours that they're supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments?
Gail Kane, 1056 West Temperance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not comfortable here tonight, but because this is a public meeting, I am required to fully disclose what I've just passed out. As advised, I have hand-delivered to every board member a document outlining concerns and my intent, which I have done, to formally file a complaint alleging that a certain board member and their designees have engaged in unethical practices. I have become a victim. My family has become a victim. Organizations I belong to have been victimized because of this behavior. Hashtag me too. I'm done. I am not going to put up with this behavior, the tongue-in-cheek comments, the innuendos, and the attacks. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on to comments from township board members. Ms. Tingaberry?
Well, first I want to thank Logan. This may not be, but I hear people thanking people all the time. So I really appreciate Logan Tisdale and his comments. And I was moved tonight to think that a man can remember scripture, had memorized scripture from the time he was in grade school or junior high, and it just, it moved me. I like hearing his testimonies. I like hearing the history of his service, and I'm just very proud of him that he would come meeting after meeting to speak on behalf of the people, from his perspective, on what is important to him. And I wish we had more people like him in the community that were willing to come and address the board on their concerns. Secondly, I'd like to thank Trudy for bringing this whole auditing service. I know you had to go out of your way to do it, and I appreciate it, because I think it's important, as the supervisor said, that we review contracts, and some we don't even have contracts for, but I think we need to review those services and determine, as was said, whether we want a contract or not. But at least it's a discussion by the board, and it's not one person making, or just the office people making the decision. And then I know you all got copies of the MTA, County MTA quarterly meeting. This is extremely important. You know, this is a group of all township supervisors, all board members from townships, the 15 townships. And there's a lot of good things that go on there, a lot of good networking, a lot of good comments back and forth that we can find out how other townships are doing things without spending money to ask a professional. I mean, they have a lot of good comments and information. It's a dinner meeting. Yeah, you have to bring a dish, but if you can't conjure up a dish at Howard's Meats or something, why, you can go and just for the meeting. But it's an excellent meeting. I would hope that all of our board would attend. And then finally, I just have a question. I was going to ask this before Logan spoke, but I would like an update on the sheriff's contract, even if the update is just that you're meeting. I want to know what's going on with that. Thank you.
It's a nice plug for Howard's. Mr. Steiner?
For what? Oh, well, I live
That's a
by
nice
them.
plug, yeah.
I live by them. They're a good meat market.
Just one thing tonight, just a reminder that this Saturday, May 19th, is the first annual bike cruise, starting registration between 9 and 10 a.m. at Jackman Road Elementary. It's sponsoring the senior send-off and girls soccer. There's two different rides. There's one that's called Land to Lake, which is 30 miles, and it goes up various roads up toward Luna Pier and back. And the other one is a local run that's a family ride, and I think it's 2 miles. Is that correct, Al? And it's primarily through subdivisions, and they'll be escorted as well. And unless circumstances out of my hands take over, I will hopefully be part of the ride.
I'm sure you will. Mr. Clements?
Two things really quickly. First, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the cost recovery ordinance getting done. I think that's going to provide some areas where we can receive revenue, not punitively, but in an effort to just aid the citizens of Bedford. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing in that effort. The other thing, and Mr. Supervisor, I apologize, I completely forgot before the meeting, but if you could speak to or address, if you don't already have it planned in your comments, about the roundabout story that was in the paper. That was news to a lot of us, and I think it would be helpful to kind of clear that. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Fredericks?
I was going to bring the roundabout thing up, but since it's 20 after 9, I pass.
Ms. Hirschberger?
We still have mosquito dunks at the township for all the rain we've been getting, so bring your driver's license, you can pick those up. The absentee ballot applications will be going out in the next couple weeks. The newsletter update will be going out in the Bedford Press. It'll be, I believe it's June 5th. And then lastly, I just want to wish my grandson happy 10th birthday, Gabriel. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Francis?
I have nothing.
Okay. I'll try to be as quick as I can, and I guess I'll start with the roundabout. I would hate for this board to ever find out that we missed out on a grant opportunity because their supervisor told an organization we're not interested. So when I was approached, I was actually at a meeting with Trudy here in this building. I think it was on the TAP grant, Trudy, when Janine Abar came up to me briefly and said, hey, there's an opportunity for a roundabout, and we thought about Smith and Jackman. Do you want us to pursue it? I'm like, absolutely, pursue it. This board ultimately has to say yes or no. But I would never want to turn down a grant opportunity without giving this board an opportunity to look at what's proposed, the cost. I mean, so that's kind of where it's at. It's very, very, very new. We've got a lot of people that hate roundabouts. We've got a lot of people that want them. The bottom line is that area over there, not even looking at it for today, we got to look at it for the future. What's best for that spot at Jackman and Smith? There's times when it's just darn tough for people to turn from Jackman to going left. A lot of people tell me they just turn around, they go around because they just can't turn. And I haven't seen hard plans from them. Like I said, I found out too from the paper. So it was kind of like, whoa, but in no way, shape, or form was I trying to, or did I make a decision for the board. But that's kind of where it's at right now. It's new. As soon as I get an update of anything, I'll let you guys know where we're at. So that's pretty much all I know. I mean, I do know that, there's probably going to have to be some property, taken over, for the project, but, so. I just want to say that I did graduate from Leadership Monroe last week. It was a long 9 months, and it was really hard to get away from here for each one of those day-long events. I had to go for 2.5 days in the opening retreat. I went all day for Law Enforcement Day, Ambassador Day, participatory community development, health and human services, economic development, education, quality of life, and then I just did the closing retreat. I will say it was a great program that the chamber puts on. I think it's the chamber puts it on, right? And I learned a lot, and it couldn't have come at a better time for me as a new supervisor within my first few months of getting involved in it. So it was really helpful for me, and I appreciate the board in supporting me doing that. If you did support me, I think you did. Yeah, maybe you did. Okay. Rick already talked about the bike ride. Yep, it's going to be a pretty cool event. I'll be out there with my family, so I'm excited for that. I just want to talk a little bit about drainage. We are getting calls up the wazoo for drainage issues, and we are doing our best to get them turned in, and working with the road commission. They've been great. I've been on the phone with Chris Stanley a lot today and trying to help people out and get their drainage issues resolved. I will say this to the board today. We've been helping out with the Indian Acres. I'm sure you guys know that there's an area in there that just floods bad. And I mean, it's so bad, the people can't get in their homes. So the last 2 events, we've gotten a hold of the road commission. The road commission worked with the drain commission, and they sucked all the water out of there and poured it out into Stearns Road. But today I got a call from the road commission saying, hey, we're getting billed for this every week, you know what I mean? We need some help. You know, or basically they weren't gonna keep sucking it out, you know, I mean, they can't do it every other day. So I told them, let's bill us this time. They said it's gonna be around $100 and something, or $200 or something like that. But I didn't wanna say no and come, you know, talk to the board about it when then an emergency or an ambulance can't get in their driveway or somebody gets, you know. So their SAD is coming and it will relieve the problem. So they should be starting that work in the next few weeks. So, the police contract, we've met one time and had a phone conversation the second time to kind of go over some fine tuning of it. It was a really good meeting. We met for, I think, a couple hours. And then afterwards, Mr. Frederick bought me lunch, and I really appreciated that. But no, it was a good meeting. We got a lot worked on, and we actually, I think we just got an emailed update. Didn't we get an email update? I haven't even had time to go over it yet from Mr. Bosonic. So I look to have something, I would think, by the next meeting. Wouldn't you think, Mr. Francis?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
We need to look over that. It was
Your mic's on if you're in. It's on, okay.
It was a draft of what the contract might look like. There are several little changes, mostly just tweaking some language, no real change in the basics of the contract. I thought it was a very good meeting that we had, a couple of weeks ago now?
Mm-hmm.
And
And we just followed up with one, I think it was a couple days ago. I just wanted to talk recycling on Tuesdays. I just want to remind everybody in the township that the Monroe County Health Department pays for this. Dan Rock does a great job. We get every single Tuesday, you know, people are coming in, you know, because the dumpsters are full, and we do call Dan, but ultimately they are responsible for bringing new dumpsters. You know, this week they actually brought 2 first thing, which really helped a lot. They weren't full within the first hour, so just know that when they get full, we keep an eye on it. Not sure if it helps or not when we call them and bug them, but you know, we are doing our best, but it isn't we just provide a site. I just want to talk quickly about the ISD relationship. I've been in contact with ISD about a relationship with them to do some jobs around the township. They'll have a job coach, but I just wanted to get that started with them, you know, to see how we can build that relationship and see if we can ultimately work somebody eventually into a job role. You know, I'm going to be working with Paul and Trudy on this and kind of keeping you guys in tune with what's going on. You know, I've just had some initial thoughts, you know, possibly eventually down the road somebody answering phones. You know, they deal with a lot of people in Bedford Township. You know, we do have LET in place, so it's a good setup for them already. You know, just they do have somebody that's interested in maintenance work. You know, so there's just a lot of different opportunities I think we have here at Township that would fit well for them. There's a lot of odds and ends jobs that the clerk's department and Mr. Francis' department does have, you know, shredding materials and different stuff. So I'll keep you up to date as much as I can. I just wanted to let everybody know there has been a rumor about a couple park board members resigning. I just wanted to let it be known that this board appoints the park board members when they resign. I've talked to Mr. Goldsmith about it, and I have talked to MTA about it. But this elected township board reappoints the people when they resign from those elected offices. Am I correct, Mr. Goldsmith?
That's a correct statement. What has been done in the past is the park board has taken on the responsibility of, when there is a vacancy in an elected park board office, they've taken on the responsibility of publishing, interviewing, and appointing. So I think what we probably need to do, and they've started that process just currently. I was informed this evening. So I think what we need to do this time around is work with them and perhaps even ratify the appointments that they make. But I think that's a subject that we need to talk about. I was just informed this evening that they've started that process. So But
Well,
it's a correct statement to state that it's the responsibility of the board to fill vacancies in the elective office.
Well, I think this board needs to have a discussion on it before we let that go any further, because statutorily, this board is supposed to appoint those members. So, I mean, unless this board's comfortable with letting it go forward, I'm fine with it, but I don't think we should, personally.
Can I say
Go ahead, yeah.
They've already started it as far as it's published and everything. I don't see why we would stop them from going ahead and taking the applications and even doing some interviewing and then telling us their selection. It would still have to come to us for that final appointment. At least that would take it off of our shoulders of bearing all of that again. We would still have to, that would work, correct?
If you wanted to employ that procedure, it would work. The board would ultimately make the appointment. As long as what they're doing is in a public meeting, which I think it will be, they could make a recommendation to the board based on their publication, based on their interview process to the board. If you want to do it that way, you can, because this board would then make the decision, the appointment decision. So I think the board has to decide whether or not to allow that process to go forward.
I think, you know, personally, and nothing against the park board, but, you know, it's this board's job to reappoint people. You know, the park board didn't reappoint a trustee. You know, I mean, it's, you know, I'm not, it just seems, you know, I think you know, it wouldn't be hard for us to put out an application process. As far as interview goes, I mean, last time we did it publicly right at a township board meeting and chose the people. I don't know. I don't see, Mr. Fredericks?
Is that a statute that says this board appoints to a separately elected board?
According to MTA, yes.
I don't know. I'm asking Phil.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
The board it's under the election law as well, and the board has to make the appointment.
Okay, that's fine.
That's why I'm saying I don't know why we would circumvent that if that's a statute. So it's this board's job to do it.
With all due respect, MTA is not always on the right track, and so.
I would say they are with
That's your
statutes.
job.
I've never seen.
job.
I mean,
I'll provide an email to all the board members with the reference, and then the board can make its decision going forward. But if the board wanted to work with the park board, I think that's acceptable as well, as long as this board makes the ultimate appointment. So it's up to you. It's up to
here,
you
let
how
me-
you wish to proceed.
let me just read the statute really quick. If you guys want me to, I have.
Yeah, if you have it on your phone, that's fine.
Well, it's pretty long, but go ahead, TC. I'll look at it real quick.
Go ahead.
Just send it to us.
I'll
Mr.
forward-
Supervisor, while you're looking it up,
I'll
I was
forward
going to
it on to
say,
you guys.
as liaison to the park board, it is a little bit unique in that it's not a committee. It is a board that runs, seeks election. They go through very similar process that we all go through. So while I think, I mean, obviously the statute has said we have authority, Mr. Goldsmith has ruled in we have authority. I would encourage this board, as this moves forward, to think about inclusion by that board in this process, because it is distinguishably different than the normal committees that just gets assigned and we handle. So I would just like us to be aware of that and inclusive as much as this board is comfortable. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to urge members, you know, I kind of felt bad for Allenton when they're up there with some of the ridiculous questions that were asked, in my opinion. Go to the meetings. Don't just rely on certain individuals with an agenda to get your information or get some of the questions. They're very open. The people that are involved with this care a lot about downtown Temperance, and you know, this board appointed them. And I wanted to speak to the budget. This is the final year where we're spending down the budget from roads. I don't know if everybody remembers 5 years ago when we were at the junior high seeking the public's opinion on a $75 per parcel. They spoke very heavily of no, spend down your fund before you come asking us for money. That's what we've done. We've spent down the fund to almost $1.2, $1.5 million. There was no hard and fast number that we agreed on. It was it's just a workable number, and I think it was a percentage we had kind of talked about. We're there now. We're not going broke. It was a planned spending, so after this last year, we will reevaluate, okay? So, and when Ms. Stanberry said it right, that we act like the sky is falling. This was a planned spending. If we didn't want to spend the money down, we shouldn't have spent the money down, but we got a lot of roads fixed. And this year alone, there's gonna be $3.6 million of projects in Bedford Township. That's unbelievable, and I'm very proud of what we've done and what we're still doing. So, I appreciate it, so. If no further questions.
I do have one. Can I?
Go ahead.
You mentioned the cleanup. I know this is hearsay. I get a lot of hearsay, but the spring cleanup, you said we had to pay that extra money, but the rumor that I heard was that there's a guy that goes around collecting for pay other people's trash to bring them to our thing. He has a Bedford residence, but all these other people don't. So I think we need to have a policy about our spring cleanup and how we monitor that, because, you know, people are making, if this is true, he's making money off of collecting it from other townships, so.
I don't know. This year was definitely a big learning experience with the spring cleanup. Every year it's been, I don't know, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Well, with Facebook, we spent $15,000 on the spring cleanup. So we're talking to Stevenson's about that because it was such a huge jump. But people definitely used it, and we definitely talked about next year what we need to do as far as maybe one trailer per person, or
Yeah, that's what I mean.
we
a
got to figure out
policy
something, a
that
policy, yes,
limits,
you're right.
you know, one delivery per person, because Facebook is all over the country, and he could be picking up stuff from New York and bringing it here. Who knows?
Okay. If no further questions, we stand adjourned.